So good morning, everyone. My name is Phil Jones, and we're here to talk about HDMI 2.1. The goal is to give you an overview of 2.1 and how does it work, and can you utilize old equipment, and what type of cables do you need, all that type of stuff, and even why is there this format out here. So who am I? My name is Phil Jones. I am the Director of Training for Sound United. And Sound United is a conglomeration of brands, a whole bunch of brands that you know and love. Denon Marantz Class A, Definitive Technology, Polk Audio. So people ask me a lot about things such as HDR, 4K, HDMI certifications, and things like that. So I wanted to take some time and discuss those with you. So the first thing we get asked is, why do we have another specification? Seems like every time I turn around, there's something new. HDMI 1.4B, HDMI 2.0A, HDMI 2.0B, HDMI 2.1. So we get asked a lot about these different specifications. And so we want to go in here and we want to explain to you why why did they actually do this. And a lot of it has to do with enhancements to try to make the user experience better. And for example, better video, better audio, enhanced gaming, as well as a better user experience. Now, all of these things are a benefit of this new specification 2.1. But the main reason why we need a new cable and it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to install is because for the video enhancements, there is going to require more bandwidth. You need more bandwidth. So in order to understand why you need more bandwidth for the video side of this whole new specification, we have to first talk about and go through what makes up video. So if I look at this, I can go in, and video is made up of basically 5 basic elements. Yes, there's more. We could talk about color subsampling and all of these other things, but these are pretty much the main things that you will hear and see listed. And so we want to talk about these 5 basic elements of video: resolution, frame rate, color depth, brightness range, and color space. So, sorry here, keep going. So what makes up these things? The first thing, image resolution. Resolution, of course, is going to make it bigger. It's like looking at a photo. A 8 meg photo is going to be bigger than a 2 meg photo. So as I make each photo bigger, I have more pixels of information, and each particular frame gets larger. So if you go from HD, which is 2 million pixels, to 8K, which is 33 million pixels, or for you camera people, 33 megapixels. So I go from 2 megapixel photograph to a 33 megapixel photograph, the file size is going to be bigger, about 16 times bigger. And that's for each frame. The next thing that can really expand the size of a file is resolution, motion resolution. How many frames are we actually using in order to do this? So those types of things will increase it. For example, if I go from 24 frames to 30 frames per second to 120 frames per second, it's just more files it's just more size of the video format. If I only have 24 frames per second for an hour, that file size is going to be one size. If I quadruple that amount of frames, or add 4 times as many frames, it's just reasonable that the video file is going to get bigger. So a larger, more detailed picture and more of the pictures increases the size of the file. The next, the last one we want to cover was color depth. Color depth, think of that as shades of colors. So how many shades of red, how many shades of green, how many shades of blue? 8-bit, it gives you a certain amount of shades that you can use. 256 shades of red, 256 shades of green, 256 shades of blue. When you multiply that together, you get a total of 16 million colors you could make. By moving up 2 bits, you go from 16 million colors to a billion colors. And going up 2 more bits, you go from 1 billion to 68 billion. But when you add more bit depth, you make the file size bigger. So these 3 things are the main reasons why most video files get larger. We'll talk about another one later called color subsampling, which is 422 and 444 and 420 later. But these are the main ones that you normally hear most about. 4K 60p at 10-bit, which is what you normally hear when you look at your specifications. So if we look at these 5 elements of video, you have 5 of them. So all 5 of these are part of whether you're looking at SDR video, HDR video, any regular 4K, it does not matter. These 2, color space and brightness range, really do not expand the size, make the file size bigger. It's just a different way of communicating the information. So let's take a look. The first thing, color space. Color space is basically, or color gamut, is the amount of colors or the color shades that I can use those numbers to represent. So basically, I have there's different size triangles you'll see. The if I have 8-bit, I have 256 numbers that I can express green. So if the triangle gets smaller, larger, whatever, 8-bit means I still have the same amount of numbers. So color gamut is just the size of the triangle, and then you use the bit depth, the number of colors you can select to determine where in those triangles can I pick the colors. So expanding a color gamut does not expand the file size. Adding more shades that you can select from in that color gamut using bit depth affects the file size. The next thing is brightness range. And you hear that's the part that you hear most about HDR. 0 to 100 nits, which is how brightness was measured, is what standard dynamic range is. Going up to 10,000 nits means you have 100 times the brightness range, the level of brightnesses you can select to represent Ferrari in the shadow, Ferrari red in the shadows, to Ferrari red in the sunset. By adding more brightness range, you combined with color gamut, you get more color volume. We're used to seeing that little 2-dimensional graph on the left side of the screen here, but color is more represented these days as a cube. By combining brightness and combining color gamut, you get a bigger cube of colors. And that is what makes HDR look so much better. So as you increase the color gamut and you increase the brightness, the cubes get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that is what gives HDR its lovely, lifelike, vibrant image that you normally see. And as I mentioned, increasing the brightness and picking a different color gamut to pick the colors from does not make the file size any bigger. Now, when we go back to this and we say, which element are being enhanced by 2.1? So you have all 5 of these elements. Which are the ones that they're pumping up for 2.1? And pretty much there's only 2. We're adding more resolution capabilities, 8K 60, and more frame rate. Currently, you're hearing 4K 120. Both of those numbers, actually, HDMI 2.1 can actually exceed that, and I'll show you in a chart a little later. But the main ones you hear is 8K resolution and 120 frames per second. Those are the 2 things that they're working on. Both of those enhance your resolution, what you see, your clarity. 8K is a frame of resolution. Resolution when an object is not in motion. Frame rate increases the motion resolution. It reduces the amount of blur and increases your motion clarity as you increase the amount of frames that you're using. So we go to these shows, and I walked around the last 2 CESs, and I keep and 8K, 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 or HFR, high frame rate. Those are the 2 things that everybody talked about. TV manufacturers love it. Well, I take 4 42-inch 4K TVs, and instead of cutting those four, taking that, I combine those four TVs into one big sheet of glass, and now I have a 84-inch 8K TV. So the ability to offer a bigger TV with higher resolution is good. The TV manufacturers love it. Why? Even if there's no content, because if people thought 4K was better than HD, then obviously if they walk into a store and you see 8K on something, you're more likely to upgrade from that 4K to an 8K, they hope. So 8K is what is being promoted the most, as well as high frame rate, especially for gaming. Higher frame rates makes the gaming experience better, more lifelike and more fluid. And so those are the two things that are promoted the most. But there's more to HDMI 2.1 than just 8K and high frame rate. Things to enhance the user experience and also the audio experience. So let's go through and look at these different extra benefits to HDMI 2.1. The first thing, features that enhance gaming mostly. Now, could these also enhance a movie experience? It's possible, but a couple of these are pretty much designed for gaming. So variable refresh rate. If you're playing a game, you instead of setting your computer or your gaming system to output at 60 frames per second, and everything is output at 60 frames per second, the computer or the gaming system will vary its refresh rate. But why would you want to do that? Well, if I have a person standing in the jungle in a first-person shooter game and he's not moving, there's no reason to refresh that scene 60 or 120 times a second. So what I can do is the computer can refresh it at maybe 14 or 24 or 36 times a second or 60 frames a second and spend the extra processing power to make a sharper image. Once I start moving and bullets are flying and weapons are flying and laser beams are flying, now I will increase my frame rate to make that motion clear. So the benefit of this is you get a much sharper, clearer image with less lag and less frame tearing. So the experience is fluid and more detailed because the computer can optimize each scene and every second to get you the best experience. So the game system has to output this, and the TV has to know what to do with it. The next thing, quick frame transport, just another way to reduce the amount of latency to make less lag. And when you combine that with what's called auto low latency mode, the goal is to make the game as smooth and lag-free as possible. Game lag is what gets you killed in a video game. If I have game lag and you do not, and we both come around the corner at the same time, you will see me before I see you, and I'm dead. So the lower we can get the lag down on video gaming, the better the experience and the more competitive you can be as a gamer. So auto low latency ensures that the system will do it automatically, and we'll talk about all of these a little bit more as we continue on. Now there's also some features that enhance movies and video as well as gaming. Okay, the first one, enhanced audio return channel. This is you have a HDMI cable connected to your TV, and from your receiver. Well, the TV may have an internal streaming service or a device connected to it. It can use the TV can use that same cable that's connected between the AVR and the TV to send the video signal to the TV, to send audio signal from the TV back to the AVR. And this audio signal, it's called audio return channel, ARC. eARC is an enhanced version of it. Because there's more bandwidth or more capabilities, you can have uncompressed surround sound from the streaming services or devices connected to your TV. Basically, the same quality sound as if you had a 4K Blu-ray. So if Netflix or somebody else decides they want to, which they are actually deciding, they're cranking up the quality of their audio, the audio output can be as good off of those streaming services, Netflix, Amazon, Disney Plus, as it would be if you were watching that movie off of a 4K Blu-ray. Definitely an enhancement to anybody that is into movies, video, or anything else that has audio. The next one, quick media switching. This is beneficial to whether you're gaming, video, movies, whatever. We've all seen it where when you're switching from one format to another, maybe a 480p channel to a 1080p channel, or a 1080p channel to a 4K channel, or an SDR, standard dynamic range, to high dynamic range. You get that blank of the screen. The screen goes black for a second while everything communicates. Well, the goal is to eliminate that. So when you switch from channel to channel or source to source, it's quicker with less delay. It's a better experience. Customers don't like to wait. Jason's asking, is there any broadcasting and streaming? We will actually get to that. And of course, for those who are asking, this video will be shared. So we are recording this video. Hopefully Jen is recording this video. And we will share this video at the end for those people who are curious and would like to watch this again or have someone else watch it. Okay, it says this session is being recorded. So yes, it's being recorded. I just want to verify. Right, the next thing. So we go back here. The next thing, there's advantages to high dynamic range. High dynamic range has existed for a while. So, but there's some other parts to high dynamic range. Part of the specification also says that you should be able to support dynamic metadata. So let's talk about metadata and then what dynamic metadata is and why you can already support my dynamic metadata right now. So the first thing, many TVs cannot reproduce all of the brightness and all of the color that is in a HDR signal. So what happens is on the file, there is metadata to tell the TV to switch to HDR mode, and two, give the TV some information about the movie or the video so it can adapt itself to get the most out of that HDR signal. So the first thing, there's a flag to switch, called an info frame, to switch the TV. Then there is metadata. And that metadata normally is, when it comes to static metadata, the brightest pixel in the movie and the average brightness of the brightest frame in the movie. So it looks at what's the brightest pixel in the movie. So say it's a pixel in that Harrison Ford scene, and that is 2,500 nits. Then it says what's the brightest frame in the movie, and it says what's this frame with Harrison Ford, and it says what's the average brightness of that frame. And it says if you look at all the pixels on that frame, the average brightness of that frame is 400 nits. So the TV uses that information to try to adapt itself and tone map. It's called tone mapping, to get the most out of the set. The problem is when you watch a movie, there's bright scenes and there's dark scenes. So if I try to use the information, that static metadata that's only based on this one frame in time on a different scene in that movie, such as the scene to the left, the signal is not optimized to get, the TV's not really optimized to do its very best. Dynamic metadata, each frame is information is shared. So as the TV gets new information for each frame, so it can determine what's the best way to tone map itself. Sometimes the information is shared with the TV and the TV makes a decision. Sometimes it's the system, Dolby Vision, tells the TV exactly how to optimize itself frame by frame by frame. The benefit is you get a better looking picture, whether it's a dark scene, bright scene, every scene is optimized. Now, this is part of the HDMI 2.1 specification. However, there's already formats out there, HDR10 Plus, which is a derivative of HDR10, and Dolby Vision, which is also are both dynamic metadata versions that are already available today. Many of these things that are part of the HDMI certification means you must do them in order to have or support them in order to be an HDMI 2.1 certified device. It does not mean an older device cannot um, cannot do it. It just means that it's not that in order to get this nice certification, you have to have it. And that is why it is a lot of the receivers that you have now and a lot of the products you have now, video displays, are already supporting some of these convenience features and some of these performance features that are available in HDMI 2.1. So the next question people says, well, like we were talking about, oh my God, I have all these components, TVs, projectors, cables, sources. What am I going to do with all of those? Um, what about that AVR? Should I wait? And because to the customer, or should I wait as a customer because I bought an 8K TV for instead of getting a great new home theater system now or AVR now? Well, let's talk about that. The first thing. Many 2.1 features, as I mentioned, have already been adopted by companies like us, Denon and Marantz. So while these are, you have to do it for a 2.1 display, it does product. It does not mean an older HDMI 1.4B or an HDMI 2.0B display cannot do it. So for example, eARC and auto low latency mode. Let's look at each one of these. The first thing, eARC. eARC, like we said, gives you that uncompressed audio from in surround sound. Like if I go back here, you get Dolby True HD and DTS Master Audio, the best version of Dolby and the best version of DTS in Atmos and DTS:X. So you get immersive 3D audio at its highest quality, which is like a 4K Blu-ray. So if you look here, when it comes to enhanced audio return channel, we've supported regular audio return channel forever, but enhanced audio return channel, we have been supporting, we have products since 2018 that have supported it. So for example, Denon X85, Denon X3500s and above supported in 2018. So 4500, 6500, etc. Also, Marantz 6013 and above, 8012s, etc. also support eARC. This year and last year in 2019, we have actually added eARC support to the majority of our AVRs. The only two that you don't see that are supported are two channel receivers that happen to have HDMI switching. But pretty much everything else supports eARC or audio return channel, from a 650 AVR 650 all the way up to an X8500. You have eARC support right now, so you can take advantage of that feature right now. The next thing is auto low latency mode. We talked about auto low latency mode. In order for this to work, you have a source, a repeater, and a sync. The source says, I am playing a game. It is the job of the repeater to pass that information to the sync, the display. So an AVR, a receiver, is always a repeater. The repeater takes the information, it pulls off the audio and sends the video information and the rest of the information to the sync. It repeats. A repeater can not only be an AVR, it can also be a matrix switcher or even an HDMI balance. So in auto low latency mode, say I am watching Netflix on my PlayStation or my Xbox. The receiver has all of its enhancements on, whether it's scaling, auto lip sync. The TV has all of its cool video processing on. The second I switch the game system to a game, the game says, I am playing a game. And immediately it will alert the repeater, which will switch to its low latency mode and pass the information to the TV. So it switches to its low latency mode. So what you end up with is the best gaming experience and the best video experience, and the devices will switch to those modes automatically. You, as a user, your customers do not have to deal with it. It does it automatically. It enhances the experience. And this is available on a lot of our products right now. How many? If we look at auto low latency mode, We actually have products that were introduced in 2014 that actually support auto low latency mode. So you already have two things to enhance your audio experience from streaming services, and you already have another one to enhance your gaming. And these things already exist in receivers right now. So a lot of this capabilities are available to you today. And we already talked about dynamic HDR, dynamic metadata for HDR. Dolby Vision has been supported by for a while on our AVRs and on a lot of other devices. So moving on, the next question we get asked, well, what about this 48 gigabits per second? Am I going to need it? Do I need it now? When will I need it? Is the next question we get asked, or I get asked a lot. So I want to give you some basic facts so you can understand when you or your customer are going to need to really step up to something that has 48 gigabit video switching inside. So let's first talk about a few facts I want you to understand. The first thing, there are currently no HDMI 2.1 movie sources available. So physical media, there is no disc. The current 4K Blu-ray does not have the bandwidth capabilities to support 8K 60 or 4K 120. They would have to come up with a whole new compression scheme or a new laser for for a new disc to end up with a new physical media. So the current disc won't support it. The next thing is there's no standalone streaming devices that have been announced. So that means like 4K, like Roku's or Apple TVs. And finally, there's no satellite or cable set-top boxes. They are doing some testing for 8K set-top boxes in Japan for the Olympics, but the majority of set-top boxes currently do not support. And there is kind of a chicken and egg thing going on here too, because most manufacturers aren't motivated to design a physical media or come up with standalone devices or come up with channels unless there is content. So studios are not shooting their content. They may capture it in 8K, but it's mastered at the most in 4K. That is because movie theaters are 4K displays. So I'm not going to spend double the money to master a movie in 8K when I can't play it in the movie theater where I make $1 billion on Avengers. So there's no motive. The studios are not as motivated to make 8K content. The same thing with broadcast content, whether it's TV shows or things like that. Most of the major studios, there's nothing to play it on, so they're not really motivated to make 8K content. And finally, the cable providers and the satellite providers. To make one 4K channel, I have to give up 2 HD channels. And we see how many 4K channels you have now because you don't have very many. Because it looks better for a cable provider to say they have 200 channels instead of saying they have 50 4K channels. So many cable providers and satellite providers or broadcasters are hesitant to give up the bandwidth for 4K. To go from HD to 8K, you would have to give up 16 channels. And most cable providers are hesitant to do that. So they may eventually do one or two special events, but right now there's not a lot of content and there's not a lot of motivation for them to make content. Could this change? Absolutely. But that is the state right now. So don't expect all of a sudden tomorrow there's going to be 50 2.1 source devices because that's not really the case. There are going to be future gaming systems coming out. PlayStation and Xbox will definitely support it, but there's a way to get that signal to your traditional AVR right now. You basically plug the game system, your brand new shiny game system, into your new shiny 8K TV or HDMI 2.1 TV. And then you would send the audio from the TV playing the video game to your receiver via ARC, the HDMI cable that's already connected. And I'll show you I'll show you a chart on that a little bit later, or an illustration of that a little bit later. Finally, probably the first places where you're going to get content is going to be streaming. That is where a lot of the first 4K content came from, streaming from services like Netflix and Amazon and Disney Plus, who were trying to build a reason for you to subscribe to them instead of just having cable. So you may see some services coming from internal streaming services by the majors, or maybe sponsored by companies like Sony or Samsung. So their 8K TVs actually have 8K content. If that is the case, the streaming service is built into the TV. So you would send the content, the audio from that streaming service that is built into the TV back to the receiver using eARC. So the video never touches the AVR. So um, so guess what? You can still utilize your AVR. So is there a rush to buy a new AVR because of 48 gigabits? Maybe not. So we talked about these gaming systems. These are going to be the one things that we know are going to support 8K up to 60 frames per second and 4K up to 120 frames per second. Interesting. After talking to a lot of gamers and going on all the forums, most gamers are more interested in the high frame rate than the 8K resolution. Higher frame rates, 120 frames per second, makes for a smoother gaming experience. When you have these fast action things going on, a smoother, clearer image makes you a better shot. So they would rather have more frames than less high resolution frames. Many of the game developers are focusing more on the 4K 120 aspect of it, but you will see some 8K games up to 60 frames per second just to show that they can do it. But many people you'll see a lot more high frame rate versions of the games in maybe 4K HDR at 120 frames per second with variable refresh rates and things like that. So there are these new game systems coming in. So what if I want to take advantage of that? Well, right now it's simple. You take the game system, you buy yourself a new ultra high speed rated or HDMI, which is the certain name. Ultra high speed HDMI is the name, the actual approved name for an HDMI 2.1 certified cable. So I would take my game system and I would plug it into my TV, my 2.1 game system plugged into my 2.1 TV using this new 2.1 certified cable. And I get to take advantage of all of the great things that are available in 2.1. 4K 120, 8K 60, variable refresh rates, auto low latency mode, everything goes right into the TV. Then I would send the audio backwards to the AVR using the standard HDMI cable that is already connected to the that you already have that was connected from your AVR that you already have to your TV. This make sure you get a good one, a good 18 gigabit one with Ethernet. You'll see HDMI with Ethernet. Make sure you get a good cable. Most good cables have that, and you can pass it eARC back and forth. eARC audio back to the receiver, and all of the video from your 4K devices and your cable box and your Roku 4K and your 4K Blu-ray player, you can send that to the TV, and the TV will upscale it from 4K to 8K. Simple. So until there is multiple external 2.1 sources, there is no rush to upgrade a Denon Marantz AVR. You can use the one you have today. Now, newer ones coming down the pipeline will have the switching already built in. Why? Why not? But I'm telling you right now, if you buy or you own a great Denon or Marantz AVR and you've bought it in the last year or so, that piece will be able to live in your system for a very long time, including many of the cables that you already own. So the next question is, what if I want to be prepared for HDMI 1.2.1? What if I want it right now? And I don't want and I'm worried that if I buy a receiver, I may end up with 17 sources. I may have so for that customer that says he's going to buy an Xbox and a PlayStation and a gaming PC and some $20,000 thing that comes out that is the first device externally that plays back 8K, do we have a solution? Yes, we do. If you Denon and Marantz both have solutions. The Denon flagship AVR receiver, the X8500, and the Marantz AV Pre-Pro, the X85, the 8805, can both be upgraded to 2.1. Right now, it has an HDMI 2.0B board in it. We will offer a board replacement or a board upgrade. So basically, when there is some sources to play and the customer finally decides that he has enough sources that he wants to utilize the switching built into the receiver to switch multiple HDMI 2.1 sources, he can send the receivers to our service facility. In the US, it is in I think it's upstate New York. And for a fee, we will upgrade, we'll pull out the old board and replace it with a HDMI 2.1 compatible video board for all of your switching and on-screen menus and everything else. The timing and price has not been announced, but we are going to do this. So you can buy these receivers. You can buy this receiver and you can buy this AVR now because these are our flagship hero products for both Denon and Marantz, and know that you don't have to replace it in a year or so, or 2 years or so, or 3 years when there is a bunch of 2.1 sources. So we have you covered. But in the meantime, a lot of people will probably, it'll go a long time, even if they have these, before they replace. If they don't have a video game, if they're not a gamer, they're out. If they don't, they're not really going to be concerned. If they're a gamer or all of a sudden a bunch of sources come, they have peace of mind. So what about the cables? We get asked a lot about the cables. Am I going to have to replace every cable in my system? What cables still work? And what do I need to know about cables? So we could spend an hour just talking about cables, but I want to cover a couple of quick things. Just so you understand what's going on in the cable and how a lot of cables you could probably continue to use. They won't be certified 2.1, but it's a chance that they will still work in a 2.1 environment. So let's take a look inside of a cable. So there's lots of wires and things going on in this cable with lots of different signals going through. In fact, there's 19 different wires inside of a single HDMI cable. The ones we want you to look at and be concerned with is the first thing, or what are called those TMDS pairs. Those are where the signal is sent. Okay, those are where the signal is being sent from. And there's normally 3 of those, 3 signal wires. Then there's also what's called a clock pair. This is used just to send timing. And then there's some other things that you would send your audio, your metadata information, your 12 volts to power a device, your CEC, your control signal so your TV can control a sound bar or something like that. That is what's inside of this cable. Somebody's asking the realistic maximum length. We'll get to that. And when you talk about good cables, we will get to that. So let's continue on. So inside of this cable, we talk about all these wires. The ones we want you to be interested in are the ones right in the middle that are called TMDS. These are where the video signal is done. And right now they are using 3 of them to send the video signal. There is another TMDS, which is the clock channel. Right now it's just used for timing. And then you have all your other stuff for CEC and things like that. And this is how our cable is used that is certified up to 2.0B. This is how that specification works right now. But what they did is now they're taking that clock channel and they're going to make that clock channel a 4th channel to send video. So instead of using 3 of the TMS channels, I have 4 channels that I can use, which is why in order to do this, it requires some hardware changes to the video switching of the board to get these higher bandwidths and use our 4 channels for this particular purpose. So right now, you have 3 of the 4 channels, and an HDMI cable is currently used to carry the signal. And the fourth channel is reserved for timing. Each of the channels right now are rated or certified to carry 6 gigabits per second. So which is where you get the 18 gigabits that you hear about for HDMI 2.0B. An 18 gigabit is the spec. Doesn't mean it can't do more than that, but it had to be able to do at least that to be an HDMI 2.0B certified cable. When you go to 2.1, what they're doing is now they're using the fourth channel. And now if you have 6 channels, you have 6 gigabits per channel and you have 4 channels, you are already at 24 gigabits per channel. The next thing is they're going to increase the bandwidth that they're going to drive down each channel from 6 to 12 maximum, which is where you get the 48. So this means that you may have some cables that a short cable, say you have a very good short 1 meter or 2 meter cable. Right now it is certified for 18 gigabits. It does not mean that that cable cannot move up and support 12. So you don't know that. It's not certified to do it, but there's a very good chance that those shorter cables could possibly handle a higher bandwidth. The inside of the cable has not been changed. It's just what the ends of what is coming out of the ends of the cable that has changed. So there's a good chance that if you have a very good cable from companies like AudioQuest, Metra, high-end ones that support 18 at shorter lengths, there is a very good chance that that will work. Okay, so it doesn't mean that it has to be certified to work. Certification gives you and your customers peace of mind. All right, that's what the difference is. It's certified to support all of the features that will go all down the pipeline, and it will support 48 gigabits per second for uncompressed 60 and 120. If I have a high-speed cable, that high-speed cable may support 48. It's just not certified to support it. Okay, so it doesn't mean older cables can't do it. It just has not been tested to do it. Eventually, the cable manufacturers are going through and getting their cables tested, and you will know quickly which ones you already have that it will probably still work. So if you look at this, there's a whole bunch of different things or different rates of signals and different resolutions and bandwidths that can actually be supported by 2.1. We have been talking a lot about 4K 120, which is down here, and 8K 60, which is over there. But if you look, this can support using a type of compression all the way up. 2.1 can support all the way up to 10K 120. So hopefully it'll be a while before we have to go through this 2.1 thing again. Oh, by the way, the 10K 120, the ones in red are going to require a type of compression, but all sources and all displays will be able to understand and utilize this compression. So if you're a 2.1 device. So guess what? Hopefully we won't be having these discussions about 2.1 or 3.0 cables for a long time. Hopefully I have a flying car before I start talking about HDMI 3.0. All right, so we went back to this. You can utilize, so the points I want to get across to you, you can utilize your older devices, your older cables with 2.1 components together in one system. The main thing you must have in order to make sure that you can continue a long life, a long usable life for your Denon AVRs or anybody's AVRs is the AVR and the TV needs to support eARC. By the way, no more, never, ever use a Toslink optical cable to go between your TV and your receiver. Those optical cables that you would use, those little cheap, the old school optical cables, most of them will not pass surround sound from your TV's internal streaming services to the receiver. So you have Atmos and all these great surround sound formats in your Disney Plus or in your your Netflix, or maybe your upcoming 8K streaming service. But if you use an optical cable, you get stereo. All right. So do not do that. Make sure that you use eARC, the eARC output of the receiver plugged into the eARC input of the TV, and use eARC. A lot of installers used to not like ARC, audio return channel, because it was combined with a thing called CEC, Consumer Electronics Control. It basically, the TV controlled everything down the pipeline, and installers don't want their control systems to control everything in the house. They don't want the TV messing with their control system. Now, on most TVs, almost every single TV and almost every single high-end receiver, you can separate eARC, or audio return channel, from CEC. So now you can use ARC without worrying about it screwing with your AV system. Okay, so that's a good thing. The next thing people ask me is, well, is it going to be confusing because the customer turns the input knob on the receiver to pick between my Roku, my Blu-ray, and everything else, and the TV's on HDMI number 1. And then when I want to watch a game, I got to switch the TV to HDMI number 2. Yeah, you will have to do that unless the customer has, or unless you have, a nice control system. Right now, when I hit watch TV, it turns the receiver on, switches to the Roku input, and tells the TV to go to HDMI number 1, and it goes right down the line. All I'm going to do when I get my gaming system is I'm going to basically go back into my control system and now say, when I watch a game, switch to HDMI number 2, and everything else that I'm playing TV, switch to HDMI number 1. So once you put that in the control system, the experience is just as seamless as it was before, but the customer gets the best of both worlds. The gaming system is most likely going to be next to the TV because you want to have your controllers there, you want to change the disc, you want to be able to do things with it. Everything else can be in a rack 50 feet away in a closet, but you don't want your game system there because you want to put your hands on it. So this is normally not going to be a big deal for most customers. Some more things. The length of the cable matter. You can have a great cable, okay, and as Greg asked, what is the length supported by a 2.1 cable? Great, George, we don't know because they're just starting to test those cables. I do know right now that if I look at 18 gigabits, after you get past about 18 feet, most passive copper HDMI cables struggle to support 18 gigabits. So length has a major impact on the bandwidth that can be supported. So, but I will tell you that if you have a good 3-meter or 2-meter high quality 18 gigabit cable from a reputable company, there's a good chance that that cable will support the bandwidth required to look at and enjoy a 2.1 source. It just will not be certified. Some other things I want to point out. We talked about the importance of eARC. Many HD-based-T extenders may pass video, but they will not. Most of them do not support eARC. It's not. They weren't even thinking about ARC or eARC when they developed these things. It was more about sending video than it was sending audio return channel. So there are some high-end ones that support audio return channel, and but there's a lot of them do not. So if you're using extenders to put, instead of using copper cables, you're using Cat5 or Cat6 to run HDMI long distances. Talk to the manufacturers of the extenders you're using and make sure they at least support 18 gigabits per second, 18 in, 18 out, and that they support eARC. The customer will have to pay a premium for them, but they will last a lot longer in the system than ones that will not. Nobody wants to be able to plugs a game system into the TV, and then all of a sudden it won't send the audio back to the receiver. It sucks. I know, because it happened to me. using just regular HDR sources. Use higher end extenders, buyer beware. Copper is still the best way to go. So when you talk about it, there's different ways to get longer runs. So we know that maybe 3 feet, 6 feet will work on a standard passive HDMI cable, but it won't. We don't know because it has not been certified. It has not been tested. You're going to have to just try it, and hopefully some of your better cables will work. The same thing applies to these longer active HDMI cables. These are actually active copper cables. It says fiber optic, but it's actually active copper cables. Basically, there's a little amplifier in there to boost the signal and increase the bandwidth capability of these cables for long distances. These are some examples. I would talk to these manufacturers to see for more information about these cables, but we know based on my experience that these cables normally will support when I've tested them 18 gigabits at longer up to 50 meters. Moving on from there, even better, are what are called active optical cables. So instead of copper in the cables, these actually have fiber optics in the cable. And these cables can support really long distances at bandwidths exceeding 18. A lot of these already have been tested to do at least 24. So you can already are at 24 at meters at really, really long distances. So maybe if you're only going 30 feet, these cables may have enough bandwidth to support 2.1 gaming at 4K 120. But I can't say they are because they have not been tested and certified yet. So please talk to the cable manufacturers. The ones that we do know that you can utilize are what are called if you pull fiber, they call it fiber optic cable. It's this dedicated cable you see here through the wall. This is already rated to support 100 gigabits per second, double what HDMI 2.1 specifies. And there are actually baluns available for these cables. So you basically pull this in the wall and you use these baluns. You may have to upgrade the baluns in the future, the transmitter and the receiver in the future, but that cable in that wall is good. So you never have to worry about it. So fiber is always the best way to go. So copper, hopefully, if it'll work. If not, go to a active copper. If not, after that, go to a fiber optic cable. And if after that, go to raw fiber. Because if you pull two pieces of this thin wire in the wall, there is no way you're going to have to worry about it going back in the future and not being prepared for 2.1. So we talk about all these cables. I suggest this to eliminate heartache and frustration. Regardless of the solution you're using right now, you should test your cables, every single cable, whether it's using a HDMI extender and balance, or whether it's using a long piece of copper or active copper or fiber cables. You should test them before you put them in the box, before you put them in the wall, because it's a lot easier to fix a problem to test your 20 cables before you set the whole system up and one cable is bad and you're trying to go back and figure it out. So these testing systems can be expensive. The least expensive one on here, I believe, is the Neridio Fox and Hound, and I believe that's about $2,000, $2,500 for that system. But at Denon and Marantz, we still have a solution for you. We have an HDMI diagnostics tool that's built into all of our Denon and Marantz AVRs. There's a little that if you plug the cable into the HDMI out, in and the monitor out, there is a button press that you will put into the receiver, and it will send out, it will run a diagnostics on the cable. And you can do things such as limit the EDIT or the HDCP if you have video problems. So there's actually a really good diagnostics tool built into the receivers. Now, this is only testing to 18 HDMI 2.0B, but at least you know the cable can do that. And hopefully in the future, we shall see when you have that better source, maybe that cable will support. But at least test your cables to do 18, because if they can't do 18, they definitely can't do 48. All right. A few more things. Bigger is not always better. We have a habit of when we look at these systems and we see all the different settings in a game system, we want to turn everything up. Oh man, I want to do 4K 120 at 12-bit color with 444. Those are the biggest numbers. Well, if you do that, you're wasting, you may not get a better picture. You're just adding a bigger load to your system. So, for example, we look at this chart, and I go back here to 4K 24p, which is what 4K Blu-ray is. Well, 4K Blu-ray is 420 10-bit color. And that's at 30 frames per second, that is 8.9 gigabits. Most 4K Blu-rays are actually 24. So it's actually it's actually about a little bit more than 7, a little less than 8 gigabits per second on a 4K Blu-ray today. All right. Now I can go in to my Oppo and turn everything up, 12-bit color and 444, and all I'm doing is, and I make the file 13. What lives on the disk is 4K. What lives on the disk is 4K 420. So you turning it up is not going to make the picture any better. And all you're doing is making the load harder to send down your pipeline. All right. So let me give you an analogy or something you should think about. Here's two signals. One of them has 444 and one of them has 422. The 444 is a bigger file, but it only has 16 million color shades. The 10-bit one, that's 422, is a smaller file, and it has a billion colors. So even though the file is smaller, the picture is better. Subsampling is another way to make your files bigger, and a lot of times people want to turn it up because it looks cool, but don't do it. It's the same as if you bought your wife a diamond ring. All you're doing is taking out a little box and putting it in a shipping container. It's harder to move from point A to point B, but it doesn't make the diamond any shinier or look any better. So a lot of times, do not turn it up. Your TV, if you see all the colors from your TV and from your display, that is because you're seeing 444. The TV will automatically, or your display will automatically take the 420 and make it 444. What's going to do a better job upsampling colors? A $7,000 TV or a $50 Roku? Let the TV do the color subsampling up conversion. You will get a better picture, and the load on your system will be less, and those cables, you may be able to get a little bit more out of the cables that you already have. All right, so don't do it. And last but not least, you try to get the customer to buy fiber, he says no. You try to get the customer to buy a better optical cable to run in the wall, he says no. At least say, let me put some conduit in the wall, because it's a lot easier to pull that old wire out if there's conduit. So conduit is your friend that if you need to update in the future, you can actually update. So let me answer some questions. We already talked about what's the minimum length of an HDMI 2.1 cable, maximum realistic length. It all depends on what you're using. If you're using fiber, you'll be able to go 50 or 60 feet. 70, 80 meters, depending on the fiber solution that you're using. So it depends on what type of cable, but all of that has not been tested or certified yet because they're just starting to test right now. Bob, we talked about good cables. Some audio and video files say that cables must be certified and have the hologram. Okay, if you looked at the picture I showed you, it had a little badge that said ultra high speed. That is that hologram certification. That gives you peace of mind. So if you look at better cables by companies such as Metra, AudioQuest, and all of the better cable companies, you will see that little logo on the cable. So it says that it is certified for that length. But beware, Brand X's Schmeckman cables are certified ultra high speed, but in the small print, it'll say for lengths up to 8 feet. So you have to make sure that each cable that you buy has that certification, not just the line of cables. The cable line, the Schmeckman, may be certified Ultra HD, but it doesn't mean the link that you're buying is certified to be ultra high speed or even high speed, 18 gigabits. So you need to test them. All right. Somebody asked, well, will the 6500 support HDMI 2.1? The Denon X6500 is going to be an HDMI 2.0 B device. So you have auto low latency and eARC. The only Denon and Marantz pieces that are going to be upgradable that are available right now are the 8500 Denon and the AV8805 Marantz Pre-Pro. Everything else has some 2.1 features in it, but they will not be certified or upgradable to certified HDMI 2.1. All right. Thank you guys very much for your time, and hopefully I will see you on the next WebEx.